Welcome to episode 90 of Eat, Drink, Write, and Urban Fantasy Whiteboard. I'm Sherry.
I'm Taylor. I feel like we have not introduced ourselves in
In a
90
long time.
episodes.
I know. Every time I'm thinking, these people might not even know our names because we never say it. But today we are going to talk about resolution to your novel.
Yeah.
But before we get into all that, how was your week?
It was pretty good. I think it was pretty good. I don't remember. I have this problem where when I do too many things, I can't actually remember all the things.
Yeah.
So my brain is like, you did absolutely nothing, where in actuality, I did absolutely everything.
Yeah.
So that was fun. I did, and I sent it to you just before this. I did make a PowerPoint because I'm a nerd for October writing prompts, which was a lot of fun to make.
Yes, I got it right before I logged in. That looks awesome. I'm excited.
Yeah, it was super fun to make. I think it'd be really good for our Patreons, except I used pictures in the background, and I don't know if it's allowed. I used pictures in the background that I just got from Google.
Oh.
And Patreon is technically, they're kind of paying for it, so I don't know that I'm actually allowed to post that or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
well, we could put it on our website. I mean, because then it's free, but even that could be a copyright infringement. I don't know the rules.
Me neither. So maybe I could just make gradient backgrounds or something for the Patreon and so the prompt up.
It's very cool. I'm very excited.
It was very fun.
I want to do it. So yeah.
Do it. Yeah.
My week was spent in Savannah, and you can see, those of you watching can see the picture behind me. I actually took that in Savannah. That is a picture from Rocks on the Roof, which is a bar in Savannah. My mouth is watering. Right on River Street, right on the river. And so we were there for we went Tuesday through Saturday. So
you were there for a while.
Yeah, that was very nice. And it was also my brother-in-law and his wife's anniversary 2 days after ours. So they came up later and joined us. So that was fun.
That's awesome.
So that was my week. Now I'm paying for it, trying to get back. I got court on Friday. I got court on Monday. It's just
back into the swing of things.
Yeah. And so what are you eating and drinking?
So I have so I didn't eat that much lunch today. But I decided to have alcohol. So I needed some kind of snack food before dinner. So I'm eating cheese and meats. And then I have a Bloody Mary to drink. So it's very, very good, which I think I might have had last time, but I don't know, not last time, but maybe the time before. I don't know. Either way, Bloody Mary.
I don't remember. I haven't eaten anything yet either. I did have lunch, but your sister is getting home at 7:30, but I can smell the food up there. So your dad's cooking. So
nice.
But I've started on eating the Factor meals. I don't know if you've seen commercials for those.
I remember you talking about it.
They have keto stuff, and it's already made. All I do is stick it in the microwave for 2 minutes, and the ones I've tried so far are fabulous. So I'm hoping that can get me back on track. So we shall see, nice. But I'll be eating one of those tonight.
Yum. All right.
Now, I couldn't find any jokes that dealt with resolutions. It all went straight to, it was just weird stuff. So I just pulled some dad jokes.
Okay.
What did the janitor say when he jumped out of the closet?
What?
Supplies.
Oh, God. That one is horrible.
I told you they're dad jokes.
That one's pretty bad.
What does a sprinter eat before a race?
What?
Nothing. They fast.
Oh, God. Jesus.
Just one more, I promise.
Okay.
I don't trust those trees. They seem kind of shady.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Okay, moving on. So resolutions. What is the resolution of a book? Well, it's also called a denouement.
Denouement?
Denouement. It's French, so I'm not quite sure how that goes. We need Jordan to come tell us how to pronounce it.
True.
But it is French for untie, which I thought was interesting.
That is cool.
Because to me, the resolution is
to tie up everything. Yeah.
But I guess it's untying in the fact that it's straightening everything out to put us all on board as to, what happened.
Right.
So the resolution is basically the conclusion to the story's plot.
Yeah. So when I think of, big fancy words, I mean, it's not a big fancy, whatever. This is going to be a great episode. When I think of, the words that are, like resolution, I start automatically think of that chart that was always given to us for stories when we were in classes or whatever. So, you think of the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and then of course the resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you talk a little bit about all of that kind of thing. So
yeah. The resolution is where any unanswered questions are answered and all, quote, loose ends are tied, end quote.
Yeah.
Conflicts are resolved and the story concludes. Excuse me, goodness. Oh, I didn't say what I'm drinking. I'm drinking a La Croix. My stomach hadn't been feeling well, so I didn't want to drink alcohol tonight.
Gotcha.
So the resolution allows a story to end without trailing off or leaving that reader confused or unsatisfied.
Yeah. So, I mean, just based on that definition alone, it's a pretty important part of writing your novel. You want to make sure that you leave your story off on whatever tone or note you want your reader to feel or resonate with at the end.
I've often felt that I end too fast sometimes. So
me too.
I need to work on the resolution part of it. I think we've all had that, stories that we've read that we thought ended too soon or didn't, it's like, when you're reading a book and you're like, oh, good, I've got, this many pages left. And then it just ends because part of those pages are a glossary or something. I hate that feeling.
Yeah.
And that's why you need this resolution. It's to, bring your reader to an okay level after the climax, after all the excitement, after all these things that have happened. It calms them back down and resolves everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not the same thing as the climax. So the climax is the point where the central conflict reaches the highest point of intensity. And I love writing the climax.
I feel like I'm bad at that.
And it is very hard to do then the falling action and the resolution, because what I wanted to happen happened. And that was the fun, cool stuff. And so tying it all up and is more difficult, I think. So the purpose of the climax is to transition from the rising action, and then you have the climax, and like you're talking about that chart we all know, and then into the falling action, which then leads to the resolution.
Right.
So the falling action is right after the climax, when life is settling back to normal, which could be the same normal as it was at the beginning. They might have come full circle, or it could be a new kind of normal based on what's happened. Like in dystopian societies, a lot of times you'll have this horrible dominating culture, and they beat that. And so now the new normal is obviously going to be something different than what the old normal was going to be.
Right.
The climax and the resolution are closely related, and they both happen towards the end, obviously. The climax is the high point of the story, the battle, the confirmation, the catharsis, the revelation. It could be revolution.
It could be revolution.
And once that climax has been resolved, the story can end, but you can't just end it right there, which I've read books that have done that, and it pisses me off.
Right.
I feel angst. I still have the tension that they've built to, and it hasn't been released.
Yeah.
So how do you write the resolution? Well, it's definitely always at the very end of the novel. It's after that falling action, after the climax.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody could even mistakenly put a resolution,
anywhere else.
Novel.
Yeah. It is concluding your story with a scenario that makes sense, given everything that's come before.
Yes, and I think that's a super important point, just because it definitely has to make sense. Plot that you've created throughout the whole story. If you have this story that you've built these events upon, and then your resolution has nothing to do with those events, your reader is going to feel like, what is this? Like, what just happened?
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a happy ending. There isn't always a happy ending. All the conflict and drama could turn out in such a way that the character meets his downfall. The character could even die.
Yeah, absolutely.
That happens. The key is that the readers feel satisfied, that things are wrapped up in a way that makes sense, like you said, given that everything that's happened in the story,
right?
You're trying to satisfy your reader.
Well, because we've talked about plotting before, and you want to build each scene that happens needs to build on top of the one that came before it.
Right.
There has to be a reason that you put these scenes in this order. There has to be a reason that you use these events in your story. And then by the time you get to the resolution, you need to make sure it all makes sense at the end of it as you're tying things up.
Yeah, definitely. And caution for those authors who create series, which we do. It's often tempting to leave certain elements unresolved and to not tie up loose ends so that you have this ready-made hook to go on to your next book.
Right.
And that's not necessarily it is a problem depending on how you do it.
Right.
You have to, if you fail to provide a solid resolution, you're not going to entice your readers to pick up the next book. You're going to piss them off.
Absolutely.
They're going to feel cheated. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because I've seen a lot of people, I follow a lot of writing groups on Facebook and Twitter and all of that kind of stuff. And, the question gets posed a lot is, how do you feel when authors leave questions unanswered from one book to the next? And a lot of people are not happy about it.
Yeah. I mean, some questions are going to be, there are subplots that are going to be, like one of yours had something to do with a parent, I think, or I don't remember, somebody trying to find somebody or something. And we don't have that answer in the first book.
Right.
So that's an open question, but it doesn't have to have an answer to resolve the conflict that's going on. Oh, I think it was your story with the magic, the illusion magic.
Oh, yeah. Mac.
Mac. She doesn't know where she comes from. She's got her whole history is up in the air, and we've been given hints and teases, but we don't know. But that doesn't matter. You don't have to resolve that in this first book, because that, even though it's a question that hasn't been answered, it doesn't it doesn't prevent us from having a satisfying ending to this first book.
Right. And I think the point here to take away from what we're saying is that, make sure you wrap up the main conflict. Each book is obviously going to have a story you're trying to tell. There's going to be a main plot, and then your series might have an overarching plot. So the difference is you wrap up the main plot.
That's like Kresley Cole.
Yeah.
Hers are romances. So the main conflict is between the couple.
Yes.
And how they get through all of their moments, the same formula of a romance. But there's all these other things going on in the background. This thing is coming. I can't remember what she called it. It's been so long since I've read them.
The Ascension.
The Ascension is coming.
Or Ascension? I don't know. Yes, but yeah.
But something like that. Yeah. And so that is ongoing through all of her books, and all of these characters. She's brilliant in how she does it, because she carries the timelines twist into the other books, which is absolutely amazing. I want to be her someday. I would love to be able to write like her.
Right.
But yes, that main conflict, this couple resolves all their issues and becomes a happily ever after, which is what you get in a romance novel.
Right.
But she certainly doesn't answer all the questions that, and in fact, we meet some of the other characters in her later books in each of these couples books.
Yeah.
So we're not saying that you can't leave questions unanswered. We're just saying you can't leave things that are pertinent to that book's plot line unanswered. Because that will piss people off.
Absolutely.
You can think about how to leave some loose ends dangling and make sure that, to make your reader want more, but you don't want to leave a cliffhanger necessarily.
Right. I mean, and cliffhangers aren't necessarily bad. I think it depends on how you do them. And that's the whole point of what we're saying is make sure you wrap up the main story. Have we done an episode on cliffhangers? I don't know that we have.
I don't know that we have either.
I think we oughta.
That would be good. Yeah. Yeah. The key, like you said, is you're not leaving any questions unanswered that need to be answered in this book.
Right.
Resolve that main story arc completely, but you can leave one or two subplots unresolved, hinting that you'll pick them back up later. You just got to be careful. And I know it is something that we all want to, it's so tantalizing to want to leave these hooks out there.
Yeah, because you want to make your reader curious and everything.
Yeah. But like, maybe one of the main characters defeated the villain, but he got away to fight another day. So like, think about Harry Potter. Harry Potter did that. Voldemort got away in every book, but she resolved those pertinent issues to the plot of each individual book.
Right. Well, like take the first Harry Potter, for example, because, most people have probably seen or read that. She wrapped up the entire plot line dealing with the Sorcerer's Stone. However, Voldemort, who was the main villain, still managed to get away, and he comes back in the second book, and so on and so on. But she wrapped up everything to do with the Sorcerer's Stone. They figured out what it is. They figured out why Voldemort wanted it. They figured out how to get it. They figured out, all of that kind of stuff, and then it was destroyed. So like there was, a very clear ending to that main plot of that first book.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's a really good example. I think, the Mercy books have very subtle questions left unanswered. Like, because Mercy is very episodic. It's very, book by book. Each has its own plot, and you could probably just pick it up in the middle of the series and, jump right in.
Yes.
But I think Patricia Briggs does a really, really good job of leading the reader to look back on books before and be like, oh, she did leave that unanswered. This is why she's writing this book now. And, a more obvious example would be, in the first book, she did a favor for Stefan, or Stefan did something for her. And then so in the second book, she ended up having to do something for Stefan since he helped her.
Yes. Patricia Briggs is brilliant. She is a wonderful manipulator of the plot. And she does tie up and resolve each individual book so that we're content and happy with that book. Not that we aren't all begging for her to get the next book out soon because we want to go on and read the next one.
Right.
But also think about, where the romantic lead falls and they fell in love and get married, but there's a hint of conflict yet to come. Like maybe there was some drama with the sister and the reader, okay, they're happily ever after, but we also know the sister's not really happy about it, or, some other underlying plot that can then come back later.
Right.
Resolve your main source of conflict in a logical and satisfying way. Now, how, that they're like, thanks, that helps a lot. How do I do that?
Yeah. Like what kind of tip is that?
Yeah. But it is, that's what you need to do. You need to be satisfying about it, but you can leave a few threads ready to pick up in the next book. I actually kind of like that word threads, because it's not, it's not like this big gaping hole. You're not leaving holes. You're just leaving these little threads that you might, could pick on, that might pick your reader's brain and make them want to read that next book.
Yeah, I feel like you probably like the term threads because you also like the term weaving, which
I do
too. I get it, but you can weave the threads into a tapestry kind of whatever.
Yeah, I do. Readers who love what you did in this novel are going to be eager to follow you into the next, without you having to do this trick, a writer's trick of leaving unanswered questions. So, go ahead and make sure that you can create this satisfying story, and that will actually make them want to read the next one, because you haven't left them going, well, she can't write because, she didn't answer my questions. So,
right. Absolutely.
Yeah. During the resolution, readers learn how the protagonist has changed. So how did they grow? What did they learn? Did they remain the same? Did they get more evil as a result of the crises and the story and the plot line? You've got to show that internal character journey in the resolution.
Absolutely. I think that's super important. I say it all the time. Character development is my shtick. I love it. It's my favorite thing to write. I really enjoy ending books, and maybe you've noticed this about my writing, about my books that you've read, but I love to do a callback to the very beginning of, where I start my characters out. I put them either in the same setting. I put them in the same, mental state. I do something to call back to that very beginning scene where I show the status quo, and I like to show how things have actually changed now that they're in the same spot,
what's
but like
different.
Right. And so, and it could be the setting that's different. Maybe the house that I started my character out in at the beginning is now blown to pieces and they're still standing there looking at the wreckage, something like that. I love doing a callback to the beginning of the scene. And I think it's a really good way to show how that character has changed.
I like that. That's a very good piece of advice. I was thinking of the example of the Hunger Games, particularly book 3. The resolution in book 3. Now, this is another tip for series. You've got to, it resolved everything. There are going to be things left open in all the books that you've gotten, and your final book in a series, whatever number that might be, has got to tie up everything, unless you think you might do a spin-off or you might do something else. But if you're going to end it for good, and your readers have immersed themselves in this world and these people, you have got to tie it all up so that they're satisfied that these characters that they've come to love are going to be okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So like in the Hunger Games, I was satisfied with that ending. It was not my favorite ending. I am one of those, I do like happily ever after. Not that wasn't a happily ever after. It was an ever after. And it was satisfying based on her character and who she was,
Right.
But you want that kind of satisfaction in your reader.
Yeah.
Underscore your theme in your resolution. Now, don't
definitely,
you don't have to bang your readers over the head with it, but it is a nice way.
Your readers are smart.
Yes. It's like you said, it's a nice way to do a callback to what your theme has been all along. Just do it subtly.
Definitely. I love integrating themes into works. I feel like it's very easy to do, quote unquote, easy to do through symbolism and dialogue. And, I guess I just love the craft of writing is the thing here.
Yeah,
but
me too.
Absolutely. I think theme is very important in your resolution. I think it's a good send off for your reader to be like, that was what this book was about.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. You want to make sure you narrow your in the beginning. I think we've talked about how you come up with, like when you're writing your that one-liner sentence.
Oh, the hook or the log line or whatever.
The log line. You're trying to come up with a one-sentence thing that describes your book. When you're reading the end of your book, did it answer that question? Did it meet that goal that you had originally set out to do? And if it didn't, then you've got some work to do.
Absolutely. That's actually a really good tip, is to, when you come up with your log line, make sure you answer the question of that log line. That's really clever. That's what it is. I think, narrowing down your story goal is very difficult to do as you're writing your novel. I think it's just, we all know how hard it is to write a novel, how hard it is to write in general. And I think that's where, revising is going to come in, rewriting your novel is going to come in handy. It's easy to see where you want your story to end up once you've written that first draft, or at least that's how it is for me. That's very much how it is for me. I can plot all day long and get to the end of the book and be like, no, I'm going to go back and I know what I want to change now.
Yeah.
And that could be particularly useful for your resolution, knowing how you want it to end.
Yeah, definitely. I think that your first draft resolution may not be at all what you end up with. It may not work, especially if you've discovered plot holes on your first draft, which is going to happen, which I don't think we've done an episode on plot holes either.
I don't think we have. We probably should.
Probably should. So make sure that there's no longer any question of how the story ends. We've all seen movies or read books where it's like, but what happened? What does that mean? I'll turn to your dad and I'm like, but what does that mean? And he's like, I don't know. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to pretend that it meant this, and this is how it ended.
Right.
They can work. They annoy the hell out of me, but they can work. And they can be very, Courtney likes that kind of thing. She likes the uncertainty if it's well done. We've also seen bad ones,
I was gonna say I like them on occasion. It does depend on how it's done. If it's a story that's supposed to end ambiguously, because it can be like, hey, sometimes you just don't know what happens in life. That
that's
is
right.
valid. And I think that can be done very well as a resolution to a story, but like you said, it does have to be done carefully.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the Hunger Games. I was a bit annoyed with the end.
Yeah.
But I was satisfied. I was annoyed but satisfied knowing the main character. It was a very realistic end. It is how she would be. And she's in a good place.
Yeah.
So, and we can be comfortable leaving that book behind, knowing that those characters are where they need to be.
Yeah.
But, I would have liked her to have my personality where, you go and you take charge, and I am a leader, and I like to be in control of things. And she just was not that kind of person.
Yeah.
She did not want that. And
No.
so it was very satisfying to see her where she needed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. She definitely grew through the series and ended up where, somewhere that made, that
made sense for her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so you can be annoyed, but you can annoy your readers, but just make it satisfying. Tie it all
just
up.
Make sure it's all tied up and it makes sense for your character.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a few more tips that I have been thinking about for writing resolutions. And this kind of goes hand in hand with things that we've already said throughout this episode, but put yourself in your reader's shoes. Figure out, you as a reader, what do you enjoy about resolutions of books? And I feel like that's a pretty common tip that we give. Think about resolutions that you have enjoyed,
right,
and why did you enjoy them, and kind of mimic that kind of skill set or whatever. Write an exciting climax that brings your story's main conflict to a head. So again, we talked a little bit about the climax, but you just want to make sure that the climax is also satisfying enough to lead to a resolution that wraps everything up.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that the climax answers the questions that needed to be answered within that portion of the story, so that you can get to this resolution where you actually tie everything up and the characters are where they need to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
This one was a good one that I thought of, and it kind of has to do with plot holes. So I'll talk a little bit more about it whenever we do that episode. But check for Chekhov's guns. So I know we've talked a little bit about that term in the past. I think it's been a long time, but essentially, if you put a gun in a scene and decide to, point out that it's there, and that it's, and there was a shotgun hanging on the wall. By the way, Bob was doing blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
If you point out the gun, make sure you use it somewhere in your novel. So story elements that you've introduced in your novel, make sure that you actually do use them somewhere in the novel.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really good tip.
And
then lastly, just make sure the villain gets what's coming to them. And this doesn't necessarily have to happen, like we said, in the first book or the second book, but by the end of your series, if you're writing a series, make sure that everything is wrapped up and either the villain is dealt with, or, like we said, the characters end up where they need to be.
Well, even in Harry Potter, even though he gets away every time, he's diminished, so that's satisfying.
True.
He was dealt with. He did get what was coming to him. He didn't get what it was that he was trying to do. He didn't get the Sorcerer's Stone. That kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Also consider your genre.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good call. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a mystery, those tend to tie up most of the loose ends, or at least the ones that pertain to the mystery at hand.
Right.
The narrative arc usually reaches its climatic peak when the clues that have been scattered throughout the story suddenly click together for that detective in their mind, and they can identify the guilty party. During the resolution, the rest of the major characters are often gathered around so that the detective can explain it to them and the readers how they crack the case and tie up the loose ends.
Yeah, a good example of that, I was thinking of, is that movie Knives Out. It's a whodunit mystery movie or whatever.
So good.
It's super good. And it has a great solid resolution for all of the characters.
Yeah. Riley is going to be able to watch that at school. And I had to pay something for it. I guess they're going to have some, I don't know, something. But anyway,
Yeah,
she's
that's
very
awesome.
excited about being able to watch that again.
Very nice.
In a romance, you expect that happily ever after. So your resolution is going to have to tie things up in a happily ever after. Be sure to give your readers what they expect from the genre you're writing.
Yeah.
This type of novel will tie up in a happy way where the reader can foresee happiness to continue. A lot of times there's a pregnancy, which is a great culmination of the character's love in these stories.
Yeah, I think in general it's really important to think about your genre. We talk about urban fantasy a lot just because we are urban fantasy writers. But the romance example is a really good example because I've seen a lot of debate back and forth on this on like Twitter and Facebook and stuff, where your audience does expect to have like happily ever after with romance.
Mm-hmm.
And you may want to twist your ending and not make it a so happily ever after, but your readers are potentially going to feel tricked or cheated out of something that they expect from that genre.
Yeah, there are times when I go to the beach and I want to read just a trashy romance novel and I go to that section in the bookstore and I buy it. And if I read it and it turned into something I wasn't expecting, I would be disappointed. I would feel cheated because I knew what I was picking when I picked that up, based on the cover and based on the blurb and based on where it was in the bookstore. Don't cheat me of that, dirty romance that I want when I'm on vacation on the beach.
Right. Because like if it doesn't end in a happily ever after, say one of them dies, then at that point it's a tragedy, not necessarily a romance.
Yeah.
There are certain elements that do stick to a genre. So just make sure that what a genre expects from their resolution.
Yeah. And if you do deviate, then make sure it's not marketed in that genre.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with having your ending in a romance, be a tragedy. There's some great tragedies out there. Just be aware that you don't market it that way.
Right.
Urban fantasy, that's what we do.
Right.
Many of those are series driven. I think all that we've written are series. I don't know that I've ever written a standalone book. I don't think I have ever written a standalone book. But so consider the warnings we talked about earlier. There's no general expectation of a happily ever after in urban fantasy. And there's often cliffhangers. Karen Manning is one of the best writers in urban fantasy that I've ever read. And she has in her Fever series, cliffhangers right smack dab at the end of a book, which we just said not to do. But she is able to get away with it.
There is a right way to do it.
Right.
And she did it with several of her books.
And oh my God. And it sent everybody into a Twitter about it. And, there were all these conspiracies and what do you think this means? And all these debates going on online. It was just brilliant, but always have a reason for the rule that you're breaking.
Yeah.
And she did it well.
Yeah, definitely. I think having a reason for breaking those rules is super important. Just make sure that you think about it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because by thinking about why you're breaking the rule, that's how you actually make it work to break the rule. And, I think urban fantasy is actually an interesting genre for resolutions because you can do pretty much anything with urban fantasy. Sometimes they are cliffhangers.
Good Bloody Mary, huh?
Yeah, actually, I've had half of it, but I haven't had that much to eat today. So it's
you're feeling it.
I'm feeling it a little bit. I think my face is a little red. But sometimes, and a lot of the time actually with urban fantasy, the books are episodic, like I was talking about earlier. So each one can be its own standalone story. And yet sometimes there are overarching stories for series, like Karen Manning's books, like definitely an overarching story as opposed to like episodic. And then like you said, sometimes they're standalones. So I think there's so much that you can do with resolutions across genres. So yeah, I think it's a super important part of the novel.
Yeah. And I think the same goes for regular or high fantasy or all the different fantasy categories that there are, as it does for urban fantasy. You've got to just be careful what you do and think about it,
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's all I've got.
Oh, well, I have an interview question for you.
Okay.
Do you come up with your resolution before you get to it as you're writing your novels? So, like, do you know how things are going to end before you get there? I know you're a pantser, but
I know how the climax is going to go.
Gotcha. Okay.
But doing that follow-up action is very difficult. Although I love how I ended Beck, the frickin' fairies.
Yeah.
That I thought was just brilliant.
Yep.
Sometimes I get those epiphanies and I just love how it works. And so I loved that one, but I didn't plan it. I didn't know that that was going to be how it went. I knew the climax. I knew the battle that was going to happen and who the bad guy was going to be and how that all had to come together. But I hadn't thought about the falling action and the resolution.
Right.
Gotcha. And I struggle with that. Honestly, I do.
Yeah, no, I mean, same. As much as I like to try to plot out my novels, a lot of the time the characters like to decide. They're like, no, I'm actually going to go and do this instead. And I'm like, oh, okay, sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then, but I have general ideas of where I want my characters to end up. Like I have a pretty vague idea of what I want to happen with, with Aiden as I'm writing that one. I'm like, okay, this is generally the goal that I'm working towards as I get towards the end of this book.
Mm-hmm.
And then the only one that I have like an actual, I hope my characters let me go this way, is with Louis and Delaney. I know exactly where I want them to end up at the end of the series.
Okay.
So kind of yes and no for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know the end, but I really struggle. I think I am one of those writers that people would probably say you ended it too fast. There's got to be more. I've got to concentrate more on the falling action and the resolution to give my readers more satisfaction that it's done.
Right.
Yeah.
Resolutions are hard.
Mm-hmm.
They're hard. I have a sentence challenge for those of you who are interested in participating in that. And it's basically, I give you a sentence and you write a page or a scene or however long of a work that you want to write, and just use this sentence anywhere within that work. And so this week's sentence is, I always knew this would be the end.
I like that one.
Yeah. So
are you going to do the outro?
I can do the outro.
That's good.
Thank you guys for listening. Thank you so much. We really enjoy doing this podcast. We obviously enjoy talking and eating and drinking. You can find us on all of our social media, which you can also find through our website, which is probably more important here. So our website is eatdrinkwritepodcast.com. All of our social media is there. So we're on Twitter and Facebook and, all that good stuff, Instagram. Mm-hmm. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/EDW. This does cost us money to do, but we absolutely love doing it. We love getting to interact with all of you guys. So if you guys would like to help us out, feel free to head on over to our Patreon.
Yes, that would be awesome.
That would be
help us.
Please help us. Yeah, and then the best way to get in touch with us is through our email. So eat.drink.write.podcast at gmail.com. And that is also on our website. So everything you need to know about us is there. And thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it.
Yep. And we will see you next week.
See you next week.